This week, the Holy See plays a big part in international diplomacy. Religious sisters in the U.S. get some major recognition at the Vatican, and Pope Francis celebrates a birthday. Hello and welcome to this edition of Vatican Connections. Now, a Vatican report this week revealed that religious life is not dead, but it faces many challenges. The final report of the Apostolic Visitation of women's religious communities in the United States was released. While many feared it might be a judgment of women religious in the U.S., it actually reads rather differently. Sister Clare Millea, head of the Visitation and a Superior General herself, had this to say during the presentation of the report.
As the person who conveyed the complex reality of our religious congregations to the Holy See, with as much integrity and reverence as was possible, I affirm that the report to us today reflects my findings in a concise and accurate manner. I thank Cardinal Bras de Avis and Archbishop Carballo for hearing our voices, our concerns, and our goodwill, and for responding to us with sensitivity, respect, and clarity. Your message to us today shows that you do understand our ongoing struggle, to faithfully serve the Church in challenging times, despite our shortcomings and limitations.
The Congregation for Religious Life also thanks religious women in the U.S. for being at the forefront of education and healthcare services. The women's communities are also being asked to review their formation process to ensure that sisters get a solid theological, spiritual, and human formation, and they are being asked to review their spiritual practices to make sure they are in line with Catholic teaching on God, creation, the Incarnation, and redemption. The report also recognized that some communities are having trouble supporting their aging sisters and pointed to years of unpaid ministry or underpaid ministry as one of the causes. While recommendations were made in this report, there is no follow-up mechanism established, and we'll have more on the reaction to the report coming up. This week also saw the historic rapprochement between the United States and Cuba, with the two countries exchanging prisoners as a first step towards establishing diplomatic relations.
His Holiness Pope Francis issued a personal appeal to me.
Both Barack Obama and Raul Castro surprised the world when they thanked Pope Francis for his help. The Vatican's Secretariat of State issued a statement confirming that Pope Francis did indeed send a letter to both leaders, inviting them to resolve humanitarian questions of mutual interest. The Holy See also received delegations from both countries last October. Now, the New York Times actually reports that Cardinal Pietro Parolin moderated a round of talks at that time. The Holy See said it will continue to support initiatives that support bilateral U.S.-Cuba relations. Last week, we told you that the Commission for the Protection of Minors was expected to get new members. Well, those new members were named this week. There are now a total of 17 members on that commission, and the new members come from New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Philippines, South Africa, Zambia, and the United States and Colombia. 4 of the new members are women, and one of the members is also a survivor of clerical sexual abuse, and he started a support group for victims in the UK. We'll have full details about the new members on our blog. You can check that out, saltandlighttv.org/blog. Pope Francis turned 78 on December 17th. He didn't do anything special to mark the occasion, but more than 2,000 people turned up at the general audience to deliver a very unique gift. A Roman dance teacher organized a tango flash mob using social media. Pope Francis has stated publicly that he is a fan of the tango. Now here's what some of the dancers had to say to the Pope on his birthday.
Lunga vita e di mantenersi così. Papa Francesco. Balliamo il tango per lui come regalo.
Che messaggio vuoi dare al Santo Padre?
Che la vita è bella.
Italian media report that to mark his birthday, actually, Pope Francis donated 400 sleeping bags to the homeless people who sleep in the neighborhood around the Vatican. It was coordinated by the Papal Almoner's Office, and the sleeping bags were distributed by volunteers, including several Swiss guards. Canada's new ambassador to the Holy See has officially taken up his new job. Ambassador Denis Savoy presented his credentials to Pope Francis this week. Savoy hails from New Brunswick and most recently served as Deputy Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. His appointment was announced earlier this year. And finally, the Vatican's Christmas tree was lit on Friday in an official ceremony. In a new twist, the nativity scene was also unveiled in the same ceremony. Now, usually the nativity scene would not be revealed until Christmas Eve, but it looks like Pope Francis is making his mark on the Vatican's Christmas traditions. Did you know? Cuba has hosted 2 papal visits. St. John Paul II visited first in 1998. His successor, Pope Benedict XVI, visited the island nation in 2011. After John Paul II's visit, Cuba made Christmas Day a national holiday, and after Benedict XVI's visit, Good Friday was made a national holiday. The final report of the Apostolic Visitation of women's religious communities in the U.S. was presented this week. Though the visitation was limited to communities in the United States, Vatican officials said the key message, which is that religious life is not dead, can be a source of hope and reflection for communities around the world. But how do the women religious themselves see this report? We have the 3 religious women in key roles in the U.S. with their reactions and their hopes for this report. Mother Clare Millea was actually the head of the visitation. She's also the Superior General of her order, the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and this is what she had to say.
Today marks the conclusion of this long journey that was the Apostolic Visitation of religious institutes of women in the United States. And as the person entrusted with this service to our congregations, I do feel a sense of gratitude to the Holy See for caring so much about the women religious of our country, to have conducted this service to us and to see that it has ended with many positive results in dialogue with the dicastery, in hearing that so many in the church, and especially that the Holy See places such great value in our life and is doing all that it can to help us in our journey of continuing fidelity to the church. The Holy Father's apostolic letter to all consecrated persons is a wonderful, wonderful message. I've read it so many times. I've shared it with my council, with my communities. And we, as a congregation, are planning initiatives throughout the whole year to re-excite our sisters to the depth, the beauty of our own charism, to evaluate our presence within our community so that we can be better signs of communion, our communion with other institutes, our communion with our local and universal church, and the quality of our ministry to others. And so, as a religious superior, I see so much that we as a community can work on. As one who conducted the Apostolic Visitation, I am just very impressed that I see the working of the Holy Spirit so clearly. The 3 objectives that the Holy Father gave us in order to wake up the world are to look at our past with gratitude. And I see that during the Apostolic Visitation, we did that. We all went back to our founder says, and we rediscovered the joy of belonging to institutes founded by persons who had received this unique gift of a charism from God. The Apostolic Visitation and the way it concluded today give us that desire and that joy to live our present with passion, as the Holy Father asks us to do in this letter, and also to look forward to our future with hope. Hope that the God of surprises will continue to keep the religious presence not only in our country, but in the world, alive, because he said we as consecrated persons do have a prophetic dimension that only we can give to the church.
Sister Sharon Holland is the president of the Leadership Conference of Women's Religious, and she's also the vice president of her community, the Sister Servants of Mary Immaculate. The Leadership Conference she leads has also been part of a doctrinal investigation by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. So understandably, some of the communities she works with were apprehensive about this visitation and the final report. But in the end, here's what she thought.
The report, of course, is directed to all women religious in the United States. As president of LCWR, I'm here together with Mother Agnes Mary to receive the report, so to speak. The report, of course, is about individual institutes, the lives of our members, and not specifically about the conference as such. But I believe it's going to be received very positively and with gratitude by the conference as well. And I think my hope is that in each institute, the report will be read, studied, prayed over, discussed, so that, as it indicates, each institute will take the challenges that apply to it in order to move forward into the future. It's important to distinguish between the Apostolic Visitation, which was out of this congregation for congregations of institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life, and the doctrinal assessment of the conference as such that was undertaken by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. They're two different processes. The study of the Apostolic Visitation is about institutes and the life of members. The study taking place at CDF is about the one conference in particular. So they're two different processes with a different object, and they have to be distinguished even though both United States and involve many of the same religious. I think the implications for my own congregation, for the IHMs of Monroe, there's two other sets of IHMs, is going to be a launch into the future. Like everyone else, I'm hoping that we will, and I know we intend to study it, discuss it among our members, and see what it says to us about how we go forward. We're certainly very engaged in a variety of ministries in the United States. We're listening to the words that are coming from Pope Francis about going to the periphery. A lot of our folks are already there. And so I think it's going to be another impetus for us going forward when we have time to read it and discuss it and pray over it and put it into action.
Finally, Mother Agnes Donovan is the Superior General of the Sisters for Life and the chair of the Council of Major Superiors of Women Religious. Now, her congregation is relatively new compared to those of Sister Holland and Sister Millea, and that played a role in how she and her community experienced the visitation.
Sitting today at the head table with the Cardinal Prefect of the Congregation for Consecrated Life and the Secretary, Archbishop Carballo. It's a wonderful thing to experience the unity and the universality of the Church. I think it was a wonderful experience of the solicitousness of the Church toward her religious and her desire to understand them and to promote the value of religious life at all the levels within our church in America. The message that I will bring home to our members and to the sisters and the communities that those members represent is the message of the importance of religious life, the legacy on which we stand as women religious in our country. We stand on a legacy of a powerful work of God. And it is now in our hands to realize that in our times and to create something that others will receive in the next generations. to exhort us to living this great gift of consecrated life really well for the sake of God and His kingdom. Well, I should tell you what it was like for us as a new community that is still in its foundational years to receive news of the Apostolic Visitation and then actually to experience it. As a Superior General and with my council and other leaders of the community who are major superiors, the first work, after we had a visit with Mother Clare, I had a personal visit with her, which was really a moment to relish the gift we had been given in our charism. You know, by her probing questions, asking us to reveal what the meaning of our particular charism was. Then we were asked to fill out a great deal of documentation, actually, which was a work we embraced enthusiastically. And in embracing it, what we realized was that it had prepared us well for our first chapter of affairs. It gave us a forum for self-reflection and self-evaluation. And in that process, we were able to define two areas that were areas that became the focus of our work as a community in our first chapter when we discussed how to move forward. So it was incredibly valuable to us. But I think one of the most beautiful things I experienced beyond that in the Apostolic Visitation was when the two visitors actually came into our community. We quickly took them on a tour of all of our missions and apostolic work so that they could get a feel for who we were. And then they were eager to meet every one of our sisters, and did. And our sisters felt for the first time in that unique and singular way an experience of the universal church coming to them. And they spoke as if they were speaking, and they wanted to know that the church and the Holy Father would hear those aspirations, those dreams of their hearts as young women who have been called into a radically new way of life by way of the call to consecration. And I think in that, they felt closer to the church universally and globally.
Time to flip through the papal agenda and see what the Holy Father has been up to this week. On Sunday, the Pope visited St. Joseph's Parish in Rome, where he met with the sick, a group of gypsies, a First Communion class, and couples whose babies were baptized this year. On Monday, Pope Francis had a special audience with employees of TV 2000, the television station owned by the Italian Bishops' Conference. He said, in a world where words and images can be used to manipulate or scapegoat people, Catholic media has to be aware of the power of words. He said the first task of a communicator is to reawaken those words. Now, Pope Francis arrived half an hour late for this audience and started by apologizing for the delay. He said almost every meeting he had that morning went at least 10 minutes over time. Wednesday was the general audience, and it was Pope Francis's birthday. At the general audience, the Holy Father officially started his new series of talks on the family. He reflected on the Holy Family, of course, and imagined what Jesus' youth and adolescence might have been like, and what daily life might have been in their home. He said mothers can certainly learn from Mary's care for her son, and dads can benefit from the example of Joseph, of a good man who dedicated his life to defending his wife and son. He also said we can imagine how an adolescent Jesus might have encouraged those around him to dream big and cultivate their vocation. Pope Francis added that the Holy Family is an example of the vocation of being a family, which is to make love the norm, not hate. On Thursday, the Pope accepted the credentials of the new ambassadors of 13 different countries. He told the ambassadors, "Today we are all happy because yesterday we saw two nations who were estranged for so many years take a step to bring them closer." He said that historic moment was brought about through the work of ambassadors and diplomacy, and he reminded those ambassadors that their work is ultimately to build peace. Also on Thursday, Pope Francis met with a delegation from the German Lutheran Church, along with members of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Germany. He praised the German Catholic Lutheran Dialogue for its joint study on God and human dignity, and said ecumenism has to be a part of the daily life of these two churches. He also said the mutual respect and esteem between Catholics and Lutherans will be reflected in the way that the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation will be marked in 2017. It will be a celebration of a shared faith in one triune God. Time to take a look at the resignations and nominations this week. 4 priests in different parts of the world are becoming bishops. One is Father Onesimo Alberton. He becomes Bishop of Rio do Sul, Brazil. Father Adelar Barufi becomes Bishop of Cruz Alta, Brazil. Meanwhile, Father Jean-Marc Echene becomes Bishop of Pamiers, France. And Pakistan also has a new bishop. Pope Francis accepted the resignation of the Bishop of Hyderabad, Max John Rodriguez, who reached the mandatory retirement age, and has appointed Father Samon Shukardian as his successor. Father Shukardian has been Vicar General of that diocese since 2010. Vatican Connections is interactive. We answer your questions and explain things you want to know. You can reach us on Twitter at VatiConnections or by email at info@saltandlighttv.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions during this part of our show. That's it for this edition of Vatican Connections. It is the final edition for 2014, but we'll be back with you January 9th with a look at the Synod on the Family. As always, Salt and Light will bring you coverage of the Christmas liturgies from the Vatican. Christmas Eve Mass will be broadcast live at 3:30 p.m. Eastern with rebroadcasts at 10 p.m. Eastern and 2 a.m. Eastern. We'll also bring you the Urbi et Orbi blessing at 12 noon on Christmas Day, that's 12 noon Eastern, and 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on New Year's Day, we bring you the Papal Mass for the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God at 11 a.m. Eastern. We leave you now with a much-loved video at how the Vatican gets ready for the papal liturgies in the Basilica. From everyone here, thanks for watching, have a very Merry Christmas, and see you in the new year.
Thank you.